Hello and welcome back to Matt's Automotive Channel. In this video we have a few final touches to make on the 97 Cobra. For the most part it's pretty much done, and hopefully by the end of this video we'll be taking it out for a test drive to see how well it runs and drives. So let's get started. Okay, the remainder of the coolant lines are in, including the expansion tank. The only thing that we're missing now is the radiator fan. I'm going to hold off on that until I make sure that this is all working, and at that point I'll go ahead and buy one and put one in. We only have 3 connections left to make. Of course, this one here is for the radiator fan, and there is also one right here that's just hanging, and this would normally go into the bottom of this expansion tank. However, this particular one is broken, and it's basically just to tell you when the coolant level is too low. It's a coolant level sensor. And then the other thing is this vacuum line. Let's see, where is it? This guy right here, which I believe is used to operate the vents for the HVAC system. And of course we got one grounding strap here for the hood, and I believe that is all that needs to be plugged in. So anyway, we'll go and pressurize this coolant system here and see if we have any leaks. Now, before we go ahead and fill this with expensive coolant, I would like to make sure that we don't have any leaks first. And I'm going to do that using this radiator pressure test kit. If you look inside, it's pretty simple, but we have a variety of caps here, and then we have a pump, and we can pump this thing up to whatever the cap is rated at. I think on this one it's probably around 15. I'll have to double check on that. But anyway, there are different pressure levels, and so we'll pressurize it and see if it can hold the pressure. Okay, yeah, this is a really nice kit. I believe this kit will fit most setups in one way or another. So let's thread this on. That should be airtight, and then we'll put our pump on that. Okay. Okay, I was unable to build pressure in the tank, so I took the expansion tank back off. I verified that that has no leaks. So what I'm going to do is plug this hose here, and then I'm going to put my smoke tester in this one, and we'll see where the smoke comes out. Alright guys, I didn't even need to get the smoke tester out because I just raised the car and looked at the drain spigot here, and of course this wasn't threaded in, but it looks like the little handle here is broken off, so I'll probably run to the auto parts store and get a new one and seal it. Then we'll put it all back together, and then we'll give it another try. Now, of course, before you do this, make sure that the drain on the radiator is closed. And let's go ahead and pump this up. I couldn't quite read the PSI rating on the cap, so anyway, just for testing purposes, we'll go up to around 10 psi and see if it holds it. If it holds that, it's probably going to hold, 15 or whatever if it's rated at a little higher pressure. We just want to make sure it'll hold this. And since there's no coolant in there, it's all air, I have to compress a heck of a lot of air in there to get this up. But it looks like it's holding pretty good right there. I mean, if we have a leak, it's not going to be a big one. You can see we're up there to around 7 psi. Looks like it's holding that really well. Well, we have it pumped up to about 10 psi, and right when it got to around 9 or so, I started to hear a little leak. I might be able to hear this. I think it's coming right from here. And I tighten this up, so I don't know if there's something in the radiator that's cracked or if it's just a bad hose. Now, all I did was cork this tube off and put a plug over here on the lower radiator, put the original hose back on, and then hooked up my tester to the upper radiator hose and then pressurized it. And yeah, the leak's right in this area. And it sounded like it was coming from this clamp in the hose, but as you can obviously see, it's not. It's this junction between the metal and the plastic. Okay, it took a couple weeks, but we now have a new radiator and fan assembly here. If you want the good deals, oftentimes you just have to wait for them. I could have went to the local auto parts store and had them in one day, but this cost me about half of what it would have cost to get them locally. Before putting this in the car, I think I'm going to assemble the fan and the radiator, put them together before just because I have better access and it should be just a little simpler. So this system was actually pretty easy. This raise size here obviously goes in here, and there's a couple notches. There's one here and one here that this fan just slides into. So just kind of lay it down there and then push it in. Now once the fan slid in place, it exposes a couple bolt holes here, one here and one here. There we go, the fan is attached. Now let's drop our assembly in. Alright, now put our brackets here. Now we can hook up our lines. But before we hook up any of the coolant lines, let's go ahead and get our fan plugged in. Okay, let's get in the up radiator hose. Now we can install our expansion tank, and don't forget to hook in the low coolant sensor. Now let's transfer over our tube, the small tube for the expansion tank going to the radiator. Now we just need to connect our lower radiator hose and then we can pressure test it. Now let's hook up our pressure tester and see if we can hold some pressure this time. Okay, I got this pumped up into the range between 9 and 11 pounds. It's right in the middle there, so it's probably right around 10. And I'm not sure exactly what this system is supposed to run at. And it usually says on the cap, but it's all come off here. So I'll look it up in the manual and see what it's supposed to be. But nonetheless, if we can hold 10 PSI for 10 minutes, I think we're good. There we are. You can see I got pumped up to around 10 PSI. So we'll let this sit 10 minutes and see if that needle deflects at all. And if it holds, we're good, and we can put coolant in this and fire it up. It's 11:01 right now. We'll check in 10 minutes and see if it's still holding the pressure. All right, 10 minutes has elapsed, so let's go take a look at our pressure and see if it's holding. Now I did look up the spec on this, and it's 16 PSI, so we will bump it up to 16 PSI, just make sure that nothing blows off or blows through. But anyway, you can see here, it's come down a little tiny bit, maybe about 1 PSI over the course of 10 minutes, so we might have a little small leak. I'll go back through and check all the clamps and make sure that everything's tight, and then we'll retest this again at 16 PSI. Okay, I did test this again at 16 PSI, everything held in, and from what I can tell, I might have had a little leak from this cap itself. So anyway, it's holding pressure real well, so I think we can go ahead and put the coolant in, fire this up, and bleed the system out. Now that we've determined we have no leaks in our coolant system, it's time to go ahead and add some antifreeze. And what I'm going to use here is one of these spill-proof funnels. They're really great. These funnels, they have a variety of different caps that you can use for various situations. This particular one, the yellow one's going to work for us. And just put the cap in there, or the plug rather, and then screw the cap on. Then it makes a watertight fit, and then we can take this spill-proof funnel and just put it in here. And it's kind of neat, these spill-proof funnels have a little plunger, so you can pull the plunger out. And the cool thing about this is once it's filled and you've don't need to add any more, you're likely going to have some excess in the funnel, so you can just put this little plunger in here, then it prevents any more from coming out. Then you just lift it out and no spill. Now another advantage of this particular type is our fluid level is going to be somewhere in here, which is actually higher than the little port here where they want you to fill it. So basically what I'm going to do is when I get all the all the coolant added, I'll pop this little cap off and then just bleed the air out from this point. Because normally this is the highest point in the system, but because we have this funnel here, the hydraulic pressure from this should force any air out once we crack that open just a little bit. So anyway, let's go ahead and start adding our fluid. So as I'm adding fluid in here, this thing's kind of bubbling and percolating back up and whatnot, and that's because there's nowhere for the air to go other than back up through the funnel. So what I'm going to do is crack this open a little bit right now, and I'll keep filling it until I see something come out up here. This little plug here is, by the way, 8 mm. Now the pouring should go much smoother. Really nice. This goes right in. So I'll just keep an eye out here, and when I see the level come up, I'll go ahead and stop. Okay, as I'm filling this, I can look down this hole and I can see a little bit of green in there now. So I'll just start pouring real slowly, and then we'll go ahead and start it, and we'll kind of keep an eye on this and kind of crack this open now and then just to see if we have any air in there. Okay, I've been pouring more and more coolant into the system here, and you can see we're just about there filling this plug up. In fact, if I just squeeze the radiator a little bit, you can see that level come up. So we're right there. All right, so we're about ready to start this thing. I got most of the air out. Of course, I'm sure there's still air in the system that will get moved around and probably end up ultimately here at the high point. So we'll continuously check this as we warm the thing up. But anyway, it's pretty full right now. It did take 3.5 gallons of coolant, and that's about what it's rated at. So we're pretty darn close. So we'll do that. So also keep an eye on the oil pressure, and then we'll check under the car for leaks periodically. Just make sure everything comes up to temperature. Make sure that the radiator fan comes on once it hits the temperature. And we'll also check out the HVAC system and see if we have any heat. So let's get this started. Right there at 90. Let's look under the car, make sure we don't have any leaks. So far it looks pretty dry, and coolant's not going down at all. So we'll just continue to run this, keep an eye on it. Okay, we started at 3 o'clock. It's been running just a couple minutes already. Oil pressure started at 90. It's already down to 85. Smoke coming out of the motor. That's, I believe, from the paint from the headers. As I suspected, the HVAC controls aren't working, so I can't change it from vent to floor or anything like that. And I think that's just because the vacuum line going to the HVAC is not hooked up. However, most of the air is coming out here. I'm feeling warm air already up here, so feels like that's working. Engine temperature's not come up yet. Engine's been running 6 minutes. And our oil pressure, it's coming on down. Almost down to 60 now. I thought I'd check the battery voltage, make sure it's charging, and it's looking real steady there around 13.8. Yeah, after about 9 minutes, oil pressure's down to, looks like 45 psi. That's good. Radiator fan still has not come on. I'm not sure the engine, I'm not sure the temperature gauge is working. It still looks like it's on cold. We'll give it a little bit more time. All right, 12 minutes into it. Coolant's really going down. In fact, the light came up a bit, so there probably is some air in there. And looks like oil pressure down to around 32. All right, just shut the engine off. This is percolating a little bit, which means it's sucking more coolant in, letting some air out. So maybe that's why our temperature gauge isn't working. Maybe it's not circulating coolant over the temperature gauge. Yeah, I think there's still some air in the system. All right, after running it for about a half hour, there was about 3 or 4 drops on the ground, and not much, but a little bit. And so I kind of wanted to see where this was coming from. It was oil, it wasn't coolant. And as you can see here, there's a little bit right there on that dust shield. And if we look up here, I see a little bit, it looks like the oil pan gasket. I can hardly believe that. There's nothing up higher. If we look right in between the transmission and the oil pan, you can see a little bit of oil right there. That's pretty much it. It's just like maybe these weren't torqued down enough, although they were torqued to spec. And you can see by the little marks that I have on the bolts there. I don't know, but it looks like that's what it is to me, just the oil pan gasket. We can see over here, it's just dripping down right from there, hitting the dust shield and then coming down. Very small leak. Like I said, there's only about 3 or 4 drops, and that's after a half hour running it, but nonetheless, there is a slight oil leak here. Maybe we just have a bad oil pan, and maybe it's not real straight. I should have checked that when I had it out. Looks like it's been hit before, and it looks like it's done some scraping here. K-member's been scraped. I don't know if this thing looks like it went off-roading or something. I honestly don't see how this can get scraped when you got the K-member hanging much lower. That's really crazy. And up there as well. But it looks definitely like this oil pan has been compromised. And I guess the other thing to notice is, I know we don't have the right oil pan on here because we have a little plug here for a sensor, and obviously there's nothing in the wiring harness to attach to it. So things have been swapped around a lot with this vehicle, and it just makes me wonder, you know, not only is the oil pan being compromised, but it's also not the right one. All right, FYI, regarding the HVAC system and the vent controls, I ended up just teeing off this vacuum here and then going into this one that was kind of standing alone with nothing to plug into. And I'm happy to report it works. I can redirect flow through all the different vents now, so just make sure you have that vacuum hooked up. FYI guys, the reason the temperature gauge was not working in the car was because of this little guy right down here. It's because of this little plug right down here. Kind of hard to see, is under all this, but right under this coolant pipe is where it resides. And then of course there's another one over here. So you're thinking, well, why is there 2 of them? Well, one of them's for the gauge, and then the other is for the ECU that manages the engine temperature and is responsible for turning the fans on. This is the one here that's responsible for turning the fans on and engine management, and it's the one down here that's responsible for your gauge. All right, just did the first oil change. Haven't actually filled it back up yet, but I spared you all the details of draining the oil. Anyway, what I want to do now is take a look at the oil filter and make sure there's no debris in there. If this engine is for some reason tearing itself up, we should find some metal in the filter. So let's take a look at that. Now, as with any new engine build, when you do your first oil change, you want to take a look at the oil, and I have all the oil drained into this container over here, so I'll pour that through a strainer and see if there's any metal caught in there. I've also taken apart the oil filter with this oil cutter, and I'm cutting out the filter itself, and I want to take a look at the filter and see if we find any deposits in here. So let's pull this whole thing out and see if we can find any pieces hung up in here. It's actually looking pretty good so far. I don't really see much. A lot of surface area on these oil filters. You'd never really know it, but okay, that's good enough. And as we look on the filter itself, you know, I think there's some dirt in there, and that's you know, I'm not really seeing any metal flakes or anything. Actually looks pretty darn clean. So at least we know the engine isn't tearing itself up. Alright guys, looks like she's running real well. And now we do have the coolant temperature coming up. As you can see right there, it's on its way up and it's blowing out heat. The vents work. I think it's time to take it for a test drive. The exhaust is sounding good. No smoke, that's just moisture there. Still blowing water out. Alright guys, time to give this thing a test drive. See if it can go into all the gears. See if the engine runs smoothly. Let's give this a shot. Second and third work. Actually drives pretty darn nice. There's fourth and fifth. They all work. Guys, looks like ultimately this project was a success. We got it running and driving, and if you watched all the series, well, thanks for sticking with it. I think it was about 21 different videos that we made, and we had a lot to do with this car. We started with an engine that was partially torn down. We completely tore it down and then rebuilt it. We had to straighten heads and cams and all kinds of stuff, and there are some points I was thinking we may not get this car finished, but here we are. We did it. It works. So anyway, I'm going to call this a wrap here. This will be the end of the video series. I may end up doing a few more videos on this car, doing more cosmetic stuff, cleaning up and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's done. We got to the point where I needed it to be, which is running and driving, and went ahead and did that. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye. Have a great day.